And I take all the same steps I do in any cake build. I try to make sure that I've got it exactly the way I want it before I dive in. This is a pretty good little cake. The great thing about this cake, this particular cake, is that because we're enrobing it in fondant, it doesn't need as much trimming, I would say. These edges, these outsides are soft, and I really don't need to trim this outside very much. The top I'm going to trim off, but I'm not going to bother with it on the sides too much, unless there's something really imperfect or really out of line. But I think I'm going to find this is going to be just a fine cake the way it is. If you're working with one of the vanilla cakes and it happened to be one that got fairly brown, then go ahead and trim off the brown, because that's tough. That material is kind of tough and chewy. Let's go ahead and trim this one up. We'll take the top off first. Once you're familiar with cake building and you start doing it pretty regularly, you don't waste any time. You can get this done fairly quickly and easily, and it's not that bad once you get used to it. But do take the time to make sure your layers are even and nice and level. You'll notice
2 layers or 3 layers today?
I'm doing 3. But some of you have cakes that may call for 2. Now, don't just get don't just get like how shall I say it? Shall I say the word lazy? Just say, oh, I don't feel like doing like 3. I feel like doing 2. Now, don't do that. Don't cut yourself short. 3 is cool. 3 is the way to go. 3 is classic. It's the industry standard. So, don't sell yourself short. You could do 3, and it's good. It's good to do 3 if you have the vertical enough vertical space in your cake. But some cake designs kind of call for 2 tiers instead of 3. Let's see here. I think I'm through. What I mean by that is that there are some cake designs. I've heard of some people doing some interesting cake designs. One guy this morning is doing a pillow cake. It's actually going to look like a pillow. It's going to look like a pillow with a button in the middle of it, and it's got wrinkles in the fabric, and it's pretty cool. And then he's setting a tiara on top made of I think he's going to make it out of gum paste. Gum paste or royal icing.
That's why.
Why? Just because he wants to,
He?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like almost like a Princess and the Pea kind of thing, but it's really pretty cool idea. And part of it is it doesn't matter the subject matter. I mean, reality is even we guys, if we're asked to make a cake like a pillow with a tiara on it, we're going to make it, right? Because somebody's paying us to do it. So I'm not going to criticize the subject matter by any means, because it's a perfectly good cake design. Hey, if he can do a tiara with a pillow, how many people are going to order that cake?
Quite a few.
If he's got a good picture of it, takes a good picture of it, and he puts it in his portfolio, think about all the people who will order that. I mean, think of all the young teenage girls especially, like her 12, 13. Birthday cakes, think about that. It's money in the bank, baby. That's what business is all about. Now, I just, that's the way I try to think of it. I try not to worry about whether it's masculine or not. A great deal of cake making isn't masculine anyway, right? I mean, there's some guys who order cakes, but most of the time it's women who order cakes, and they like cakes a lot. And if I'm going to try to satisfy my customer, I got to satisfy that person who's paying the bills.
It's a wedding cake, it's the woman picking it anyway.
A lot of the time, yeah.
Unless it's a groom's cake.
Unless it's a groom's cake, and even then, the bride sometimes chooses that. I know I didn't have any choice when I was getting married. Although, I must say that my wife was very nice about giving me a lot of freedom to create the cake as I saw fit. I mostly set up the cake to match the weather that was going to be that week. It was going to be 93 degrees, humid, and we were getting married in Golconda, down by the river. Okay. Talk about humid. It's one of the most humid places on the planet. It's where the mold grows on the mold. I mean, it's very humid. So anyway, the great thing about this cake is that because you are not doing a finished coat, you don't have to worry about crumbs, right? Your Crumbcoat is going to take care of the crumbs. So I'm using crummy icing because I don't have to worry about.
Crummy icing.
Yeah, I don't have to worry because it's, you know, the thing is no one's going to see it. It's going to be all underneath the fondant. So it doesn't have to be. I don't have to worry about getting crumbs in my icing. I mean, talk about freedom, and it's really very nice not to have to worry about that. So I'm just going to put on a nice, reasonable layer here on the first tier. Let's go ahead and put the second layer on. This morning I got mine slightly off center, and I realized after I looked at it that I had worked a little too fast. So again, more simple syrup. I do have simple syrup made up here, but you can also make more of your own.
I wonder, would it be easier to like put it in a squirt bottle and just kind of all over it?
It would. I think so. Yeah, it would. I don't know if you remember that lady who was in the video doing the Black Forest, but she put it in a squirt bottle and just squirted it. It worked great.
Can we do like a cherry filling today if we wanted to?
A cherry and what?
Like a filling?
If we have cherries in the freezer, sure. You're perfectly go down to the freezer and check it out, see what fruit we have. I'm not sure how many cherries we have left after that Black Forest project, but we may have some down there. And
well, we can go see like what fruit there is.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind. I know the guy who was doing the pillow cake this morning. He did raspberry filling, some of their raspberry jam, and it worked out fine.
So I can just use the raspberry jam today then?
Sure, if you like.
That's what I look for with raspberry.
So, you probably notice I'm not explaining a whole lot as I'm going along here. I'm just going ahead and building this. But I'm not wasting a lot of time because I'm not going to freeze this in between putting the fondant on. I'm going to go ahead and put the fondant right on the cake as soon as I'm done crumb coating it. I don't recommend that for you guys. I recommend that you guys freeze it first a little bit, not solid, but you know, just freeze it until it's getting firm and the buttercream has a chance to firm up because it'll make it a lot easier for you. But for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and put mine right on here. So let me take a look here. Okay, good. Time for a crumb coat. Now, I'm not looking to put a lot of icing on here. After all, this is a crumb coat. So I'm just going to put a little bit on to coat the cake and kind of get the crumbs under control. Once I get all my crumbs under control, I'm going to clean up my space. I'm going to make sure we don't have any crumbs that could possibly get into the cake when I'm working with it. And we're not going to get any stuff showing in our fondant either. So I have to roll out my fondant and coat this cake with it. Fondant has a lot of considerations to be aware of, and it's very finicky stuff. There were some folks this morning who got a little bit ahead of me, and they found out the hard way that the heating system in here is blowing full blast today. It dries out your fondant really quick. There's a lot of things that they found out that, oh wow, this stuff is really hard to work with. It's harder than it looks, and I'm going to try to explain as I go along, but that it really, you got to give it some respect. It's like, you know, when if you were ever taught how to shoot a gun for the first time, you know, the one thing they always tell you is to never ever, you know, forget having respect for this thing.